We also deal with leadership in the book. Why would we be dealing with leadership in a book on strategy? It's because we're interested in winning outcomes, the whole point of strategy, and that requires the execution and the orchestration of these approaches in the ambidextrous organization. Now, the problem is that the classical model of leadership, cascading instructions based on experience and judgment down a hierarchical organization, and then managing execution against those instructions, works perfectly fine in a classical environment, but it won't work in, say, an adaptive environment that is much more unpredictable, and it's simply not possible for the leader to be having a stable instruction set. So the question becomes, how does a leader animate the collage of approaches, multiple approaches across an organization? And in the book we deal with 8 facets of leadership that need to be taken into consideration in the new environment. Let me just touch on a few of them. So firstly, somebody needs to diagnose and segment these different approaches to strategy, which approach to strategy in which part of the organization. And somebody needs to disrupt. In other words, somebody needs to say, yesterday's approach to strategy is not the approach that we need right now. Somebody needs to coach and deploy, pick the right people and develop the right people to be deployed against the right approach to strategy, because each requires a different cognitive skill set. And we talk about the need for inquisition, for questioning, namely, where we can't have a stable instruction set, sometimes the best we can do is to ask really great questions. So leaders need to be really good at getting to the bottom of things by asking the right questions. So if you like, we define the skill set of the ambidextrous leader. The title of the book is Your Strategy Needs a Strategy. It mentions the word strategy twice, but in fact the book is not about strategy. It's about effective strategy. In other words, it's about obtaining the winning outcomes, which are the very reason why we use the word strategy in the first place, and therefore, necessarily, we need to think also about implementation. Now, just as we've said that strategy is not one thing, we think that implementation is not one thing. The actions we're required to implement strategies vary according to the situation. And not only that, but the relationship between implementing and strategizing also varies according to the environment. So let me give you 2 examples. In the classical environment, the strategizing may consist largely of analyzing opportunities and deriving a plan, and the implementing may consist of remote execution against that stable plan and performance monitoring of that execution against the plan. Let's think about that software company that's implementing an adaptive strategy. Really, the equation is turned upside down and inside out, because it starts with experiments from empowered employees at the coalface of the company trying new things. And some of those new things work and are picked up and communicated and amplified. And what is strategy? Strategy is the continuous stream of improved ideas that results from those actions. So in this particular case, strategizing cannot be separated from action, and actually the action, the experiment, comes before the strategy. The strategy is a result of the implementation, if you like. And if we went through each of the styles of strategy, you'd find that this relationship between strategy and implementation and the nature of implementation varies in each case. So what we really need is not just different approaches to strategizing in different environments, but different approaches to strategizing, implementing, innovation, culture, leadership of all aspects of business in each environment. So in the process of writing the book, we had a little strategic problem of our own. In fact, 2 problems. One of them is that our research showed us that CEOs would probably be interested in what we had to say, but they may not read the whole book. We needed a more concise form of communication. The second inconvenient truth was that we found that in our survey of 150 multinationals, we found that the right beliefs about the environment and about the choice of approach to strategy did not correlate perfectly with the right behaviors. So if you like, understanding was insufficient, necessary but insufficient to be doing the right things. So the solution to this was really 2 things. The first one was to write a very compact first chapter to the book that could be read in its own right. And the second one was to build a game for the iPad, where we led with experience. So the game is quite a fun game. We take the 5 boroughs of New York, where I happen to live. Why New York? Because it has 5. There's the number of approaches to strategy. And the idea is to win against a fictional opponent called Bruce, who is named after our founder, Bruce Henderson, a great strategist, in selling lemonade from a lemonade stand in each of these environments. And the tricky part is that Bruce is a very fierce component, and each environment requires you to not only think, but more importantly, to act out a very different approach to strategy. So through experiencing these different environments, you develop a muscle memory for what an adaptive strategy feels like, for what a visionary strategy feels like, and then you can go backwards into the content. You can ask what happened in that game. You can read a little bit about the particular approach to strategy that was required in that particular environment, and you can even click through and buy the book if you're interested. So that's the idea of the game. Many of the approaches that we detail in the book are maybe challenging, but not so challenging if you're doing them afresh, if you're doing them as a startup. If you're an e-commerce company and you're putting in place a digital marketplace, it may be hard in its own right, but you don't have to negate the past to do so. Large corporations have a challenge on top of that, which is they have to move away from a previously successful recipe and adopt a new unknown one. And they have to pick the right timing and the rate of progression in doing so. And that's a really hard problem on many dimensions. So you might call it rejuvenating the corporation. I think the first success factor is to really understand that need. So the analysis in the book shows quite clearly that the durability and the value of leadership positions is increasingly tenuous. So there really is a need for large corporations to look ahead at new ways of doing strategy. And the second one is to really boil the problem down, because you can't change everything everywhere. And we've said that it boils down to 3 essential capabilities. One of them is the capability of adaptiveness or experimentation. The second one is the capability of shaping, which is not just participating in environments, but actually shaping ecosystems. And the third one is ambidexterity, which is comfort with diversity, comfort with a mosaic of approaches rather than a single monolithic approach. We recently saw the announcement that Google was dividing itself into pieces under a new holding called Alphabet. And this is a great example, actually, of structural ambidexterity. And all of this has to be managed not only as change in the organization, but change in people's minds too. It requires familiarity with new ways of thinking that hopefully we detail in the book.